Can I hug you?
Yes. It's
I
my buddy.
love Dotty. Dotty and I have been friends for a long time.
Over 10 years.
Actually, I just want to tell you real quick, I know this has nothing to do with the class, but Dottie's the reason Jen and I met. And the reason we have our 3 cute little kiddos. So let's just say the Lord used Dotty to introduce us. So we go way back. We've been friends for a long time. They have a neat little property out in Drexel, Missouri. Actually, not too far from where my parents just got some property. Mm-hmm. They do homesteading. They have a greenhouse. They do animals. They do plants. They do herbs. They do all of that stuff. And she's very knowledgeable at it. We went down there one time and she taught us how to make was it an apple cider vinegar? We picked apples and we talked about how to make apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, we have a huge 150-year-old apple press, and so we Tom Sawyer people into working for us, and they go out and harvest the apples, and then they get to press them, and then I get to keep the juice. And
it was great. The girls had a blast. And so she has a company called Smoky Hills Farms. We sell all of her little products, her sun butters and her deodorants, and they're super popular. I mean, we sell the heck out of that stuff. So anyway, Dottie's super knowledgeable, and so enjoy the class on homesteading.
So now all of a sudden I'm nervous. I've been fine up until now. Summer asked me to start by sharing my story. So do you guys want the long version or the short version? Or does it matter? Long. All the gory details, right? So I was born in 1960 and grew up over in Johnson County. Yes, I'm a Johnson County brat. You can't hear me?
You're okay.
Okay. And when I was 12, I read an article in the Kansas City newspaper that was talking about how down in Louisiana, where they can't bury bodies after they die, they have to put them in a crypt. They noticed that the bodies weren't deteriorating as rapidly or decaying as rapidly as they used to. And in my mind, I put together somehow, well, that had to do with the preservatives in the hot dogs. And so I need to stay away from preservatives. And I was also big, that was when the EPA first started, and I became totally anti-plastic through some of the stuff that I read through them. So all that happened when I was 12, when my life goal was to grow up and be a Jesus freak hippie and live on a commune and drive a yellow Volkswagen thing. So anyway, the commitment that I made at that age has stuck with me pretty much through my whole life. I've tried to stay away from plastics. I've tried to use natural products. I've tried to eat whole. I became a mom at a very young age. I was 17. By the time I was 23, I had 4 kids. We went through periods of being very poor, of not knowing where we were going to get our next meal, living out of our car at times. So I was put in a position where I was forced to figure out how to feed my children and get the most nutritional bang for my buck, I guess is the best way to put it. So that meant cooking from scratch. So I had to learn to cook from scratch. Thankful for Julia Child's show, taught me a lot. And I own 2 books. I went to the library a lot and studied books at the library and how to do things. And then during nap times, I would focus on, how to do different things like make pretzels and pasta and, different fun things. And so anyway, I was doing all that. There was a day that was a defining moment when I was 22. I was pregnant with my 4th baby, and we had just gotten through a period of homelessness, and the Catholic Charities put us in this old farmhouse, and we didn't have any food. My husband, at that time, my first husband, was gone for the day, and it was lunchtime, and I pulled out, we had 2 cans of green beans, and I sat down and shared them with the kids, and then went to put them down for their naps. And my oldest looked at me, he goes, "But Mommy, I'm still hungry." And so I went, I just came up with, excuse, something for dinner or whatever. and put them down for their naps. And I went out to the front porch of this house and had it out with God. I mean, it's just like, where are you? How come you're not there? Why are my children hungry? What's going, I'm sure there was cussing involved. Just really had it out, and there was nothing. There was no answer. There was no response. There was no sense of his presence. I just felt like he was gone. He just wasn't there. And I remember physically standing up and walking back inside, and I left God behind that day. That was just, I was done with it. I was on my own. I couldn't trust anyone to provide for us. I couldn't trust anyone to provide for my kids. I had to do it all myself, which was wrong. It was wrong. And since then, the Lord has taken me back to that moment and has healed and showed me what was going on behind the scenes, if you will. But it was probably the most defining moment of my life at that point. So, and I don't know what happened. I know that I ended up going to the store that night, and I think food stamps must have come in the mail, our first set of food stamps. And so I was able to go to the store that night and get some dinner, and I splurged and bought a bottle of ketchup, which was something that I never did because we could never afford ketchup. So, anyway, fast forward a few years. At that point, I had dabbled in gardening a little bit. I was cooking most of our foods from scratch. I was starting to learn how to can. Growing up, my mom froze a lot of foods. She was a farm girl from Iowa, and so, but she was a modern housewife, and they didn't can things. She was appalled at the thought that I wanted to learn how to can. And so anyway, that's just kind of where the journey went from there. Trying to think what I was going to say next. We eventually, I guess it was 1987, we started going to what became Metro Christian Fellowship, Mike Bickle's church. And sorry, he keeps itching his ear like I need to speak up. We befriended some people there was a movement of people that were moving down to the Drexel area. A group of us that either had a desire to move or had bought land and were in the process of moving and either building houses or fixing houses or whatever. So we went down every weekend. We had 4 kids at the time. We went down every weekend. There was one couple who bought a house that had been struck by lightning and burnt. So they bought the property for the price of the property and got the house basically for free. So we were going in, they put a new roof on, and we were gutting the inside of the house. So we went down every weekend and helped them work. And that just increased our desire to want to be, by that time we were living in Kansas City and wanted to move out to the country. And every weekend we would go out, and it would just increase that desire. And we prayed about it. And then Mike started talking about the Joseph movement and stuff at church on Sundays, and we just really wanted to be part of that. And so we've just in praying over it, things just kind of circumstances opened up. We found a school bus for sale in the motorcycle section of the newspapers for $1,000, which of course we didn't have $1,000. We had a tax return coming, but back then tax returns were 6 to 8 weeks to get your money back. Well, we got our money that next day. And so we called and we bought that school bus. It was already mostly gutted. We built some beds inside of it and moved it to the property of the people whose house that we were gutting. And parked it there. They weren't living there obviously, and they didn't have anyone watching over the place. So we just moved in and basically spent the next 6 months camping out on that piece of property. And then through that found a house to rent and lived down in the Drexel area where we're at now for a few years. And my husband was driving up he worked at Shawnee Mission School District at the time, and he got tired of the drive, so we ended up moving back up to Belton. After a couple of years of being down there, and just tried to do more suburban gardening, I guess you'd call it, suburban farming up here in this area. Ended up divorced, ended up a single mom, 4 teenagers, corporate world for a few years, hated it, and then met my husband, who I'm married to now. And long story short, we got married, and the house that he lived in was a mile and a half from the house that I lived in when I was down in the Drexel area. So apparently I'm supposed to be down in that area. Then in 2008, we went through a time where he had a construction business, and I was working a job that was associated to the RV industry, and that was when gas prices went up to $5 a gallon and construction tanked, and we found ourselves losing everything once again. Ended up in the city for a couple of years, but during that time it allowed me to take care of my parents while they both fought cancer and through the end of their life, and that's where I met Vaughn. So it's all good. Then we ended up at the place where we're at now in 2010, and have been working our rear ends off trying to get it up and running and functional, and so now we've got huge gardens, and the house that we're in now, the people who built the house were also friends of ours that had moved down at that same time period in 1987. There was a drought in '88, and she was pregnant, and they had just put out an orchard. And so I used to go over every day, and they didn't have any watering system, so I would fill 5-gallon buckets and go water those fruit trees to keep them alive through the drought that year. Those trees are now 30 years old, and we get a bumper crop every year. So I'm harvesting what I had fed into, which was just, to me, every year I'm just amazed at what happens. So through that, we get, like I said, we Tom Sawyer people into coming down and pressing apples for us, and we get gallons and gallons of vinegar and cider and all that kind of stuff, and get to have parties in the fall at the same time. So anyway, so that's where we're at now. It's 38 acres, half of it's trees. We have cows, both dairy and beef cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, ducks, the typical. I would like to get some sheep eventually, and we won't do goats. I did goats back in the day. I'm over it. So, and I'm not that crazy about goat's milk. So, anyway, that's my story. So
you said at 22 you prayed because you had no food, and you sort of turned your back on God. Mm-hmm. And then when did you transition back? You said you went to Metro.
It wasn't until I was in my mid-30s. Mid to late 30s that I went back and revisited that part of my life, and that whole trying to be self-sufficient thing, it still haunts me. We've had some really hard lessons over the years, Kevin and I, about going back literally relying on God. The last 2 years in particular, just really learning we can't do anything, and we don't own anything, and anything we have comes from Him, and learning to really walk that out is a tough lesson, but it's so worth it. It's so worth every minute of it. So even when you don't feel His presence in it. So I'm supposed to talk about homesteading, which is a huge, broad category. If you guys, why don't you just ask me questions, because I don't know where you're at or what you're wanting. I mean, if you want to learn something specific or just more general ideas, or help me out, give me a direction. General. Fruit trees? Fruit trees? I'm really bad about taking care of them. So the trees, by the time we moved in, our trees were 25 years old, and they had been sorely neglected. We spent a few years trying to prune them every year. The first year they got a major pruning, and then we kind of let them rest the next year, and then the third year got another major pruning. Then Kevin got injured last year and has a hard time keeping up with that kind of stuff. And it's a lot faster to do with the chainsaw, which I'm not allowed to touch, than it is for me to go out with my pruning shears and the saw. So they're being neglected again. And we've lost a few. The peach trees don't typically live this long, even though they're still producing. But we did have a tornado come through a couple years ago, and that completely removed one tree and did a lot of damage to another tree. And so I guess the short story is I'm not a good person to talk to about upkeep for fruit trees.
What do you do around the ground? Do you like mulch them, or do you...
Mine are old enough that I don't do anything. If I were starting over, in fact, some of the replacement trees that we've had, I probably should have done more too, other than just putting them in the ground. I would put things like comfrey around their roots. The comfrey,
like plant it?
It puts nitrogen in the soil and is a really good understory plant for fruit trees. And there's other plants that would do well planted around the trees, other than grass, which you have to keep cutting or weed eating, and then you risk hurting the bark of the tree, which damages the tree and all that. We don't spray anything on our trees, but again, they're old enough that they've learned. We still get some insect damage and some disease every year. I guess planting enough trees that it doesn't hurt you to give up, you share a little bit with the bugs, or probably our biggest issue this year are without a dog right now. So the timing, the harvest of the peaches and beating the raccoons to it is going to be a big issue this year. But yeah, mine just kind of go wild. I'm not really good at anything that's high maintenance. I just like blueberries. I'm really bad at blueberries. They're too high maintenance. So
what is the term homesteading? What does that encompass?
To me, it's more of a mindset where the whole self-sufficiency thing comes into play, providing for yourself and your family, growing your own food. We grow most of what we eat at this point. I love going to parties because everybody's got their junk food and I can go indulge in people's junk food. Which is really what's gotten us by this last year, is the fact that we can grow our own food. We wouldn't be eating otherwise. It's been a rough couple of years. So yeah, it's more of a mindset.
You can.
Oh yeah, I can. I do a lot of. I'm growing to really enjoy the dehydrating more than canning, for a lot of different reasons. Doing a lot more of that.
What kind of dehydrator do you use?
I've got an Excalibur that quit on me last week. So, yeah, if I have to replace it, I'll build a solar dehydrator, which does well in this area. A lot of my herbs and stuff, I can air dry until the humidity gets bad. Then I had a bunch of plantain that I was trying to dry that I just can't get it brittle enough to feel safe to put it into jars. So that's when I discovered my dehydrator broke. So, but yeah, I do a lot of canning meats. We still have freezers full of meat, but
You can.
And then this year, well, starting last year, but more so this year, I try to learn something new every year. My focus this year is cheese and curing meats. So right now we've got hams and bacon and stuff hanging in our pantry that I actually cured last year. But I want to do more sausages and that kind of stuff this year as well. And then the cheese, I milk every morning. So I just bring the milk in and add some rennet to it, make just an old farmhouse cheese. And trying to use the more natural, instead of having to purchase packages of bacteria there's ways that you can make different cheeses where you just encourage the natural cultures to grow that are in the cheese. And so I've been experimenting the last year with a lot of that. And don't have a cheese cave yet, so I haven't been able to age any cheeses, but my sister has an old refrigerator she's going to get rid of, so I'm going to have a cheese cave. Yeah.
Do you have a CSA or?
We were going to do a CSA this year, but I couldn't get any commitments from anyone, so I just didn't plant for a CSA. Right now I've got more kale than I know what to do with. But so yeah, we just decided I would focus, because I've got my body care business, and then Kevin has woodworking stuff that he makes. So, we went into this thinking that, you hear diversify. Well, if you diversify, our lesson has been, if you diversify too much on the homestead, nothing gets quality time. Your focus gets too spread out. So if you're wanting to make money on a homestead, find what you do best and put all your energy into that, and then garden on the side for just yourself, or raise animals just for yourself. And I know a year ago we were trying to do everything for everyone, and just really have come back to, let's just do what we do well and make money on that, and then the rest is
Property, sorry.
yeah.
When you moved onto it, was all the animals and everything there?
No. In fact, there was no fencing. There was just a house and a shop, and the trees, and that's it. So it had been vacant for a few years, and before that had some single guy who traveled a lot who lived in it, and it was a mess. The house had never been finished. It still hasn't been finished. They ran out of money when they were building it, and so yeah, I'd like to finish it someday. But
Did you come in with the dream of what you've got now? Is that kind of why you moved there? Or?
Yeah, and the opportunity. We knew, I'd been up in the city for a couple of years. I had just finished burying my parents, and we wanted to get back in the country. We're not city people. We're not. So, no? Okay. Yeah.
So what have you planted in this that you think does well in this area?
As far as like vegetables in the garden?
And like fruits as well, like berries and stuff.
Oh, blackberries and raspberries are just taking over. They are going nuts, and it's nice if you can take the time to manage them and keep them tame and under control. I can't, so I end up with brambles basically, which, of course the prettiest berries are going to be in the center where I can't reach, but I do have thornless plants planted. So, in fact, my raspberries this year that's an old heritage breed, but they're seedless not seedless, they're thornless for the most part. And the flavor in those berries is just unbelievable. And they have joined hands with the blackberries, so it's just a big bramble right now.
How long does this take to get established?
These ones I planted 3 years ago, I think. It doesn't take long. And like I said, I know there's ways you can manage them. I just don't, and it's just for us, so we harvest what we can.
Blackberries, you get your berries off the second year vine.
Mm-hmm.
You do not get them off the first year vine.
Okay.
Raspberries come off the first year vine.
So if you prune the raspberries back, you would get more because you have more new growth? Is that?
No, not necessarily, but because you still get berries off the second year vines too, but it's just the difference in the berry.
Yeah, some people.
You've got to let them last 2 years to get berries off.
Yeah, some people actually mow down the raspberries every fall. In these raspberries, I'll get a second crop in the fall. But we stay busy enough. Like I said, we just can't micromanage like we would like to. Maybe clone ourselves someday. I keep telling Kevin I need a wife. I want to come in sometime, do a cooked meal, and
Wouldn't have volunteered.
So you guys, are you in the country? You looking to move to the country? You wanting to homestead in the city? What are some of your goals? Anyone?
We're city dwellers.
Are ya?
I love to live in the country.
Yeah.
Except ticks, so yeah.
Except ticks, chickens. We don't have much issue. The chickens run around everywhere, and
That's my, but
yeah,
my husband's a builder, so he's city
Yeah.
dweller, so
Yeah.
got a lot to touch there.
yeah,
But we do have apple trees, so the comfrey is a good.
yeah. They're really good, and they keep they're thick enough. They keep the weeds down and stuff like that. So yeah, they're really good. And then
What products do you make?
I dabble in a lot of products. Mostly, let's see. I started out. I like to teach classes, homesteading classes, so different of the household arts that they would have done back in the day. I teach classes on those. And the first year that we did that, we got a booth at the Mother Earth News Fair and set it up to advertise classes. And then I thought, well, I'm going to make a few things to sell to kind of recoup our costs for the booth. So I made a lotion bar, my gardener's lotion bar that we still have, and then I made this little first aid kit that had a first aid salve, a liniment salve, and a drawing salve, and sold those, and just to recoup our costs. So that's how I got started. There was a store, some lady with a store that wanted to ask if she could sell my stuff, and I said sure, and it just kind of grew from there. And until, by the time Kevin got injured last year, we were able to pretty much live last year on what I made. At least it covered the bills. So and then this year I made the mistake of thinking, I spent so much time making product last year. We did a lot of shows, and then decided we would rather just focus on wholesaling. And along with our website, I get a few orders every now and then from our website. But this year I thought I really would like to go back to doing the classes, and teaching more of the classes at my place. Last year I did it somewhere else, but I thought, well, I'll just do the classes here and maybe grow vegetables and do a CSA. And I ended up spreading myself out too far this year. So we've pulled back again to wholesaling products and doing classes, and then growing food just for ourselves. So we have cows for sale if anybody wants cows, and pigs for sale, and we're really gonna pull back, and most of the meats and stuff we've sold have been to family members, but it's a lot of work and just not a lot of return when you're doing it that way, so they're on their own. Anyone else? Are we good?
Would you have like a book or something that would give directions on how to take care of the different vegetables? Like I always wanted to get some raspberry vine, but I've never done it.
There are some really good books out there. It's hard to find books that focus on raising things organically. It's hard in Missouri to grow fruit organically because of our humidity and our heat and our extreme cold and extreme heat and everything else. But it can be done, especially like the raspberries and the blackberries. They really just kind of take a life of their own. They don't really need a whole lot of attention, but they will take over if they don't get that attention. I'm trying to think. I can picture the book in my mind, but I can't think of the name of it for berries. Maybe I can look it up after and see if I can find it and let you know. Yeah. And then there's others. There's one that focuses specific on growing apples organically, and other fruit trees would probably come into play there. But things like my cherry trees, it's just fighting the birds over who gets the cherries. They seem to know when they're perfectly ripe before I know when they're perfectly ripe, and they win that battle usually every year. And then keeping the turkeys our turkeys got our strawberries this year. We didn't get any strawberries, so.
Do you water all your trees every day? Or
my trees are old enough, I don't water them at all. I don't grow a lot of things that need that kind of attention. Like my tomatoes, there's a thing called dry tomato growing, where you put the tomatoes in and you don't water them. And that forces the tomatoes to grow a really deep root system because their roots are searching for water. And so you get a stronger plant through that. And the tomatoes themselves are sweeter when you do it that way. When we had the drought in 2012, the rains quit January 24th of that year. It was his birthday, that's how we remember that. And we had just finished planting. June 24th. Sorry, that came out wrong. We had just finished planting corn, winter squash, and watermelon. And they never got any water. And we had a guy working for us that was doing some watering, and I had to cut him off because we got a $400 water bill. And there's no way to recoup that cost. And then he started hauling from the pond. Well, then we got $400 worth of gas in the tractor bills. And so we just didn't water anything. And we put those seeds out for those plants, and they never had water. We had the sweetest watermelon that year. We didn't have a good squash crop. They really suffered from the lack of water. But the watermelon was amazing. It's the best watermelon we've ever had.
You didn't get any corn?
No, we didn't get any corn, but yeah. We planted the corn way too late that year. So now I'm looking at the same thing this year. I don't have my corn out yet, or my melons, or my squash.
So are they still, like, did it die? Are they going to produce crops this year? Or the seeds that you put in the ground and then didn't
I
produce it?
think, my suspicion is the birds ended up eating them.
Okay.
So, yeah, we had started, it was a new area for gardening, and it was just bad timing on our part. Yeah, we just didn't get it. We got a little bit of corn that
All
year.
the stuff
But
that you planted just before the drought.
Oh, most of it did germinate.
Yeah.
It just didn't produce. I mean, our corn was like this tall.
But they were
It
also,
should have been, 5 foot tall.
not all of them, because some of them they were all heirloom corn. Corn's a whole nother topic. The heirloom corn, for the most part, was grown for cornmeal. And those plants, some of the plants are shorter and only produce like one ear of corn instead of the tall plants that we're used to today that have several ears on them. So that was a lot of it, was that they were heirlooms. And we did get some corn that year, but not all of it. The popcorn did good. The peanuts did good that year. The peanuts were one that got put out late, and they did really good that year.
Is all your stuff organic?
Oh yeah. My theory is I feed the soil. I focus on feeding the soil. I've never had my soil tested. The only amendments that we put in are some azomite minerals, which is volcanic rock.
Yeah.
We'll put that in usually just once when we start the garden. Do a lot of composting. If I spray anything, I spray with compost tea. The only other amendment I do is when we were growing for market, we had the caterpillars on our cruciferous vegetables really bad. And so I broke down and bought some BT spray, which is it's accepted as organic. It's a bacteria. And I did spray with the BT and saved the crop, but I was going to lose the whole thing, and that was income at that time. So I've learned to really kind of like the BT. This year I haven't had to. My cabbages are just doing marvelous. And I see the butterflies flying around, and I see holes, and I've seen some poop, but they're not destroying the crop.
Yeah.
But again, we have enough planted that if they eat a little, I'm still getting a good
Do you
crop.
think that might have, like the BT from the year before might have still
Whole different area. That year was inside we have a high tunnel, which is like a greenhouse, except that you grow in the ground. So we can grow year round in the high tunnel. It's not heated or anything, so things still freeze, but you just plant plants that can handle a light freeze, and then
protected from
from the weather. So you do have to irrigate and stuff like that, but I love growing in there. It's really, really nice. And right now I've got tomatoes and peppers out there. hoping to get June tomatoes, still hoping. We got little ones on, but I don't know. So, yeah.
You guys keep bees on your property?
Yeah, bees are, it used to be back in the day, you could just put bees out and the more you ignored them, the better off they were. But there's so much pressure on the bees today. I lost 4 hives the year before last, replaced it with 1 hive last year and lost it. And then I just rescued a swarm a few weeks ago and put it in a hive in a different area. And I just have got to get better about getting out there every week because the bees, you have to manage the bees now. And like I said, I'm just no good at anything I have to manage. Anything that's high maintenance, I'm just really bad at.
Has that changed in the last few decades then?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think a lot of it has to do, the bees are weaker, and they're weaker because of some of the chemical pressure that they're under, and just some of the weather extremes that we see today that we didn't used to have, and there's just so much against them. And then even things like lack of food. You know, the farmers in our area right now are all knocking down the hedgerows. And where there used to be trees which would flower and weeds that would flower and food for the bees, there's nothing now. They're doing their GMO fields from field to, from road to road, and there's no trees in between. And so they've got the chemicals, they've got the GMOs that they're trying to pollinate, and there's just got so much against them that it's a weaker bead. If I do feed, I don't over harvest the honey. I leave them enough to get them through the winter, and then if there's any left over, which there never is, but if there is, I'll harvest it in spring. And if I do feed them, if it's a brand new hive and there's nothing in bloom, I'll feed sugar water for a while, but no longer than I have to. But for the most part, I try to feed them their own honey. If I have to feed them, I keep some set aside for them. But, I haven't had honey for a couple of years. So, hopefully, again, soon. This year, if I get on it and get out there and put another box on. So, it's a lot of work. There's always something yelling, screaming for your attention.
It's amazing feeling when you sit down at the table and you're eating a piece of steak or a piece of pork and potatoes and drinking a glass of milk, eating butter and all that come off your own property. Not is it a neat feeling, it's also a very healthy thing. Raw milk is unbelievably healthy. Where your store-bought milk is virtually a waste of time. Pardon me?
It's bad for you. It's acidic.
Yes, it is bad for you.
Do you sell raw milk?
I have a friend who does. I just hand milk right now, and I don't have a dishwasher, so I can't keep things as sanitized as I would like if I sold. I do have a friend who sells the best raw milk. They machine milk, so it never sees the air. It's not exposed to any dirt. They sanitize things really well, and it's organic, yeah. And it's grass fed. They don't feed any grains or anything. They're the ones that taught me. When I milk my cows, I feed them. It's a fermented alfalfa, and they're the ones that taught me. In fact, I buy mine from them.
So that's what they eat?
Yeah, during milking, and then the other time they're just out on the grass. So, yeah, it makes really good milk. Makes really good meat too.
Yeah.
Milk, alfalfa.
Yeah.
Making milk more nutritious.
Yeah, and it gives the cows something to do while they're standing there. Although next year, I don't think I'm going to try not to feed while I'm milking. I'll let you know how that works out. Because I've got one cow right now. We're trying to build a barn so that I'll have real milk stanchions and stuff, and I don't have that right now. So we've got half of our high tunnel is what we use for a barn right now, And all I've got is a very old metal head gate to put the cows in. So their bodies are free. And I'm sitting on a bucket milking this cow, and one of them has learned as soon as her milk's gone. It used to be as soon as her food was gone, she would swish her tail, and that was my sign to move the bucket because she was going to kick. And we had this down, and now she's learned that as soon as she's done, she doesn't even swish the tail. She does this with her hip and knocks me over on the bucket, and I'm trying to retrieve the milk at the same. It's new this week. We're working through this issue. So yeah.
The same cow.
Same cow. Yeah, she's our head cow. She's got some attitude. Queen cow. Yeah. It's not funny when you're out there on the bucket trying to retrieve the milk and you're falling down and twisting your wrist trying to catch everything. Yeah, it's not fun. And it's hot in there. Yeah. I punched her yesterday in the thigh, like, stop it. Might have been a cuss word involved, but yeah. Yeah, I know. So anyway, you guys are, someone told me to gather email addresses if you want to get on my newsletter list, and I do teach classes down at the house. I was going to bring my list. I'll have it tomorrow of the schedule for the year, if you're interested in learning any of that. And other than that, I didn't bring anything. I'll be here tomorrow. I'll have a tent outside tomorrow. So, yeah, if I'm welcome to give you whatever information you want. Smoky Hills Farm. You can find it. It's SMOKY Hills Farm. My website is smokyhills.farm. And yeah. And you can find us. Google Maps can find us, and yeah, we're there.
Share the contact information of your friend who sells her.
I'd be happy to. Yeah.
She does make. She's still making a delivery trip once a
Yeah,
week.
she actually makes a delivery every Wednesday morning up here in Grandview for milk. So yeah, that'd be a good connection. I'll have some of her brochures with me tomorrow too, but I can give you her contact information today if you're interested. Yeah. So.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. This is great. I've never really done this talk before. I didn't have to type notes. I didn't have to study anything. This is great.
I see that elderberry trees are really, really healthy.
Yes.
They grow well here in the city.
They do really well. They like to have their feet wet. When they're out in the wild, they tend to grow along road ditches and by the creek and stuff. So that's a sign that they like to keep their feet wet. But the flowers are blooming right now. You can do amazing things with elderberry flowers. And as a herb, you can dry them and use them as a fever reducer, and the flavor is wonderful. You can make jellies with them. I like to make wine with them. I make a liqueur with them. They're just an amazing flower. So yeah, and it doesn't. Yeah, the fruit's good too, but the flower is addicting. Or you can dry it. You can use it as a tea even.
See, I heard that you couldn't grow elderberry trees in this area.
Yeah, no, they grow wild here. Yeah.
Good, where are they? I'm gonna go get one.
Oh, they've got big white flowers on them right now. Just huge heads of big white flowers out on the road by the roadsides.
Just give us a minute. Thank you.
Yep.
But you gotta be careful.
Good timing.
So,
Yes.
there's also a native dogwood blooming right now too. And the flower
Say bye.
first.
Bye.